Perhaps over the years we have been too nice in not dealing with issues of discipline within the ANC. Some of the people who say we shouldn't cozy up to Russia are saying we should cozy up to Ukraine. I will continue to call him Ubaba, but I don't agree with him on this one.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. And today I'm extremely honored to be joined by a struggle heroine, someone who's made multiple contributions to democratic South Africa, both as a leader in our legislature and in cabinet, Thandi Modise. Thank you so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's an honor. It's an honor. I wonder what you made of the outcome of the 2024 elections and how you reflected on what that meant for the liberation movement that you have served for so long.
I admit that over the years, with each preparation for elections, we have, let me not say we, I have been worried. I've been worried not because I doubt that the movement I have grown up in, became an adult in, is not what and who really should continue to be in the face of the problems that hit our people, resolving, making sure that first project we had, building a nation called a South African nation, building a people, making sure that this leadership that exists continues to build for the future. In other words, we don't just plan for the next 5-10 years. We plan to have a South Africa that will exist long before we are all gone. So I've been worried about the trend with the elections. And if anybody who is in the African National Congress will say that we were caught off guard, then we will not be telling the truth. The threats have been there. And I think over the years, I remember in 2012 that the old ladies in Soweto were doing some walkabout, and they said to us, if you don't do this and this and this, we will not vote for other people. We will stay put in our houses until you fix this thing. You, the ANC, are our movement. And it is time we hit what the people who love the ANC, the people who grew up in the ANC, the people who expect a lot from the ANC, expect us to do. In other words, we cannot just continue to talk about, hey, we're cleansing ourselves, we are renewing. We must actually begin to do it. And that is, if we start doing that in earnest, if we start, and I think when I go back to the resolutions of the ANC, when we started wanting to have mass recruitment, we didn't give ourselves time to look at who then became a leader of those people. And that is when you look at Ditsobotla, when you look at some municipalities, and you see what is happening there, that says, in fact, at the branch level, we need to do far better than we are doing. We need to reflect our communities, their needs, their aspirations, but not just reflect, do something to meet those expectations.
What do you make of the decision to create this coalition government or government of national unity? There have been some calls from within the movement, like from within the SACP, to say that this was a historic mistake. On the other hand, others, we had Minister Ramokgopa on the show recently saying that this was the best decision the ANC could have taken. What are your thoughts on how the ANC has decided to respond to those results?
To be honest, when the call was made, that question arose. Why are we going this way? But the ANC, in all honesty, tried to call to accommodate everybody. A very straightforward question was asked. I remember when we first discussed the GNU. Did you invite Party X and Party Y. And the call was yes, but there has not been any response. Now, when you are from the elections, you need to form government. Time is of essence. And that is why all the parties that were interested then came together and formed this government. So for us, that was the comfort we took, that at least there was a reach out to all the parties. Come, there is no outright 50+1 winner. We need to do the best that we can to make sure that people get what they have elected. So it isn't an ideal situation, but it is a situation which the ANC had to take. It is a situation which, if the ANC, we don't open our eyes properly, we might regret into the future. It is something that should be seen as a temporary measure while we clean house and prepare ourselves to really deliver to the needs of our people.
And you've been a member of the NEC. I mean, you've held so many positions in government as well, which I'll come to. But I wonder how you see the different eras of leadership within the ANC. You've been at the helm of the party for many different leaders. What have the different leaders of the ANC, how have they been similar and different? And what do you remember about each of those that you've served under?
Well, we were almost walking on air with Madiba. The aura of the man, the respect, the value set, because he forced you. Something like punctuality, Madiba would not brook late coming. So really? You were on your toes with Madiba. But he also was very clear that he was not going to overstay. And therefore, I think even as he began his term, it was make sure that there will be people who take over from me. So in the middle of his term, he was already handing over to Comrade Thabo.
Interesting.
Madiba's greatest achievement was to get all of us South Africans moving together as South Africans. I remember that in the times of the DRC, he tried to force, if you remember, the women activists, ex-political prisoners, the women, we did not go to the DRC. And they tried to force us to go there because everybody that was going there, it would be a sister or but not the activists who had gone there tortured and whatever. And we said to him, we will not go. It is our pain. And he said, no, it's not your pain. It's the nation's pain. We have to open up. We have to deal with these issues so that they don't come back. So he also tried to build a common purpose for the South African people. His aura enveloped all of us. The government of national unity. I know that I was one of those. I was, I think, deputy president of the ANC Women's League then. The sunset clauses was something that I was arguing against. And indeed, later on, even those who at that point were saying it is just a breach, let us get into this, they came back to haunt us. Comrade Thabo took over, started looking seriously not at just uniting the nation, but looking at issues of the economy. And he did well. What he focused on was economic empowerment. How do we push for South Africans to really feel more equal? But it was in his period that good policies around the security were put in place, but were not adequately funded. And that trend has continued. So you have some of the things that are happening in the townships. You have spaza shops. You have people just jumping the fence, coming in, setting up shop, children dying. Those are the challenges that I think if right at the beginning, in the 90s, we had said we have been visitors and residents in other countries. How did we conduct ourselves? How do we expect those who are coming to reside amongst us? How must they behave, and what do we need to do to pay back for the years that we have spent in other people's? Not just open the gates, and not just, So I think that, yes, every president has had what they do. JZ came in, tried to intensify empowerment of communities. At that time, I was in the province, and we tried to look at those projects that would go straight into the people and make sure that South Africans begin to own their own economy. We were concerned, for instance, if you remember, the textile industry, South African textile industry disappeared at that time. We raised from the Northwest, we fought about making sure that the land, at least in the province, begins to go back to communities who had always owned, not individuals, communities. Because we thought then you would make sure that food security is done. We then didn't follow through because the issues of the constitutions came in. And we were the ones who were really at the forefront in negotiating, putting together this constitution. And sometimes I think we think that it is wrong to say that the land must go back to the people. Not just go back to the people. Go back to the people and enable the people to live from their land. How else are you going to equalize the different peoples of South Africa? Those who have always had land, even though, and I became unpopular in the province then as premier when I said, some of you can't even produce title deeds for the big tracts of land that you are staying in. And yet, government must take a hard position when a black person puts a mkuku there illegally. So I think if we go back to the things we did, thinking that we do not want to upset the apple cart, we build in this new country, there is too much pressure from the world to behave in a certain way. If you look at the issues of how Samora Machel, for instance, started off, young people straight back to school, go get the skills that you need so that when you take over leadership, you are trained. I must say that the ANC had tried to do that because even before people came back home, those who could were trained in administration and were ready. But we didn't continue the trend. You've got to continuously refresh the skills. You've got to continuously renew the pact with the people. You can't go along with the 5-year thing. I'll come up with a manifesto. They will still understand. No. The needs of communities change generation by generation. What was very important to my mother is not important to my granddaughter. So I think if the ANC goes back there, we might get into this. The discussions, and everybody wants to climb into this thing. Why did we allow the economy to go down? What are these things that we need to do? Then, who were our strategic partners? Now, South Africa, I think we allowed ourselves to become very vulnerable. After 1994, you did not have an outright win militarily like Zimbabwe. or Mozambique. So you have a negotiated settlement. You have the West that expects you to behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we bowed too much. And sometimes I think we forgot those who stood by us through thick and thin. And this brings me to us always having to feel guilty that we have a relationship with Russia. And me hearing somebody last week saying Russia is just a new country. No. Who helped our forefathers, those who fought in the Umendi? Russia. Who was there for us when apartheid was biting here? The communists. Who was there to train us, to school us, to prepare for this government? The people of Russia. The fact that tomorrow it might be a different party that is at the forefront of running the government of South Africa cannot take away the fact that we have been a partner in SADC. We have been a partner with Lesotho. Lesotho can't say now because the ANC is gone. These people, the new players, we have no relationship. So I think that the different leaders have come in. They've all played a different role. Comrade Cyril was supposed to help us focus on building the economy. I still hope that in this term, that will be given priority, that we will call quits this load shedding, whatever it is, that we will begin to ensure that South Africans really feel equal, that Soweto becomes as good a place to stay in like this place where we are, that in the rural areas people are not going to come, that people in different provinces are not going to troop into Gauteng because jobs can only be had here. So we need to be thinking again about the economy. How do you make sure that in the Northwest they can run their affairs?
Absolutely. How do you think the coalition government is faring? There's so much I'd like to unpack about what you said, but the one thing that strikes me is the foreign policy questions. Now, you've been at the heart of South Africa's security cluster. You understand the military side of things and the foreign relations side of things. We've seen some interesting comments from DA leaders saying, that President Ramaphosa's statements at the BRICS summit went too far, and that we should not cozy up to Russia, as they put it, in the way that we're doing. And that seems a bit strange given that they're part of a coalition where they've already signed up to be, partners and presumably speak with one voice in government. On the other hand, the coalition seems to be holding together. So I wonder what you make of how things are going so far.
Well, perhaps we should give Zuma the credit for ensuring that we get into BRICS. Because at that time, there had been so many years of discussion about the economy, the South being left out, and the pressure from the World Bank with all the other developing countries. So South Africa cannot walk away from the BRICS family. We were the third, the fourth partner, I think. We came in with a disadvantage that our economy was not as strong as at least the Russian one and the Chinese one. And with the formation of BRICS, you already knew that you were entering a space which would upset those who control the world economy. That being said, I think we should never say that because we are pursuing this, we cannot. Some of the people who say we shouldn't cozy up to Russia are saying we should cozy up to Ukraine. And to be honest, we've been cozying up to a middle of the road.
Yeah. Sure.
South Africa has been pushing, President Ramaphosa has been pushing both heads of state in both countries to talk, to get together and to talk. We must credit him with that. Yeah. The fact that the relationship between South Africa and Russia is closer is because of all the old ties. But also, I come from Mkonto Wesizwe. Wouldn't have survived Angola, Tanzania, and all these other places we're in without the support of the USSR then. We wouldn't have survived. So you don't dump friends today and forget that you might need them tomorrow. But what I also know is that when the parties meet, South Africa does not meet those parties as a little player. South Africa meets up and talks like an equal. We want the conflict between the Ukraine and Russia done and dusted. We want to be able to continue to work with the whole world. We have a problem with, and we've raised it very frankly, with the issues of Morocco and Western Sahara. We are upfront with our stand on the Israeli-Palestinian. Yeah. We should never, when we had issues of conflict within Swaziland, we did not take sides. We said it's an internal issue, but you affect us as South Africa. Solve your problem. So we must continuously be brave enough to choose to speak on behalf of those who cannot speak, those who seek peace, those who want stability, those who want to live within their own countries at peace and want to develop themselves. We must not forget that with us here, within our borders, we couldn't even use what we thought were our ancestral land. So wherever we are, I hope even after my generation has died, those who will continue to represent the ANC will continuously work towards reconciling people, digging out the problems and honestly trying to get people to talk about them, to resolve, so that we can work towards greater peace.
Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. The BRICS summit recently in Kazan seemed like an important moment in global politics, to the extent that it feels like we're coming out of an era where the West had it all its own way and it could basically tell any country what to do. And now there's no doubt that the West or the United States and NATO and its European allies are still very powerful, but they can't dictate the future in the way that they used to be able to do. We see this in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We see this in the way that the Israeli-Iran situation is panning out. Do you think we're witnessing a shift in global order, especially from the perspective of having served at the highest level of South Africa's military, basically, as defense minister?
I think we are. Because remember, the BRICS family also plays together economically, security-wise. But even before some of the countries who've just come into the BRICS family, Iran, we always had good military relations with them, just like we have with the United States of America.
Sure.
And I think the growth within the BRICS family, it threatens the economic powers. because suddenly there is another forming group. The fact that you have Iran and other oil, Saudis with their oils coming in, balances the economic power of the world a little bit. Because look at what happened during COVID. The poor countries couldn't even get donations, those who couldn't, of what do you call it?
Vaccines.
So oil was not coming through. The blockages of the oil ships coming this way. So I think really, especially this last expansion of the BRICS family, begins to push the world into that balance. Perhaps if we are balancing economically, we might be able to even begin to have that voice being carried into the UN itself. Because we do have a problem there. South Africa has been at the forefront of the just re-looking at the functioning of the UN, the representation in the Security Council, because it is important for you to create the same, feelings of we are being led by a collective that leads all of us in the world equally. Not there are still third-rate countries that will be doing what we tell them because we are in the West. The changes in Europe are interesting. I've been watching France, very, very interesting. I don't think, at the beginning I thought France, thinks it will come and it will replace certain Western powers. I've been listening to Germany, and I think that we are indeed right in making sure that the BRICS family grows, but it also doesn't just continue to serve its own. It begins to open up to ensure that every nation doesn't lose itself in BRICS. In other words, we have a problem with the West and the way they were looking at, for instance, us as Africa. The BRICS family must not come and bring other problems. It must come in and balance out and enable those who are in between these two to have free choice without being judged. Because the problem is that if you are not with the US, you are against the US. And we don't want that. We want to be friends with whoever we choose.
Are you concerned that our foreign policy might come under strain because of these tensions that seem to be at the heart of this coalition government around foreign policy? Do you think our BRICS relationship may be under threat?
It has been under threat. Remember that we had issues when we were hosting BRICS. We were being pushed from this side to this side, not to allow President Putin to put his foot here. It has been under strain when the South African military, which has had for years agreement with the military in China when they exercise together, it has been an issue. It has been an issue when we send our soldiers to go and train, especially the medical ones in Cuba, because of the sanctions between our foreign relationship does struggle. I think that what we need to do is to push ahead, continuously make sure that we are very clear as South Africa about our own policies. But the important thing is that they shouldn't just be policies of a particular party. They must be policies which all South Africans buy into, support, and will fight for. That we do not want to create or allow any other country to donate enemies to ourselves. must continue. And that independence and the role of being mediator and not being part of disputes must not make us feel vulnerable. So I think what we need to do is just create consensus within ourselves, within our country, so that government is led by the nation that understands the direction it is taking.
As Defense Minister, what did you assess were some of the most important threats facing South Africa, or what are some of the most important priorities from the military perspective that South Africa needs to keep its eye on?
A country with, and I don't want to sound militaristic, but a weak defense force invites problems.
Especially in this global moment.
It does. If you look at all the strong economies of the world, they are buttressed by a very strong military industry.
Sure.
Because a strong military industry also ensures that when you meet with other nations, you can speak. A strong country that can defend itself does not need to agitate. It does not need to sneak into other people's because it believes in itself. So our weakness has been that even though we have very brave young men and women, we have not actually looked well after them for decades. It is important for us to do that because unless militarily you can protect yourselves, even the weakest of countries will take advantage of you. In the past, you needed cannons and whatever, big guns. This year, you know that you need IT. You can wreak havoc in any country. So I would say that one of the things that we need to do is to really relook at the resources we put, leadership, renewal, preparations. We would want to look at how we look after our borders. We have come up with the BMA. We think it's the solve all. The military is responsible to ensure that your country remains sovereign. Not BMA. The integrity of your country rests with the military. The constitution of the country is protected by the military. Now, if you don't have the power to protect yourself, to deter any interference with your economy and with your political sovereignty, you are weak. So we need to do something about that.
The situation in the DRC has also been something that maybe hasn't made as many headlines as some other global conflicts, but it's something where South Africa has been involved for a very long time, even going back into the Mbeki administration.
Mandela.
Right, even towards the end of Mandela. What are your thoughts on the situation, particularly in the eastern part of DRC and the role that South Africa should be playing there?
Well, we went there in Mandela's time. We are still there. What we thought, some of us, was that we should, in the meantime, be helping the DRC to look after its own territories. In the very South African way, we thought, but start off by talking amongst yourselves. Start off by bringing in the regional players. What's the role of Uganda? What's the role of Rwanda? What's the role of Burundi? How do we diffuse this? The resources that the DRC has are a magnet to all the other players out there not to want this particular country to have peace amongst itself.
Sure.
Because for as long as they are at each other's heads and throats, they can continue to steal the wealth of the Rwandese, the Congolese people. So we agreed with President Ramaphosa that whilst we are still there, whilst we feel we are obliged to continue being there, at least the talks amongst the people of the DRC must start. At least the neighbors must be involved. Because sometimes what is happening there is influence from outside this continent. The funds come from outside the continent. Just before the elections, what we were seeing was even the people who were hitting the DRC, that they were not Congolese. The mercenaries were so well armed with sophisticated weapons that the Congolese could not withstand. So, because in the world mostly defense ministers talk, and they talk very directly, and we began to have a conversation with our counterparts. Guy, we know what your country is doing. We know who you are funding. But the people who are dying are not just those soldiers. It's women, children, and people who are aged. Stop it. So we would say that, of course, we want our kids back. We want our children back. But we were made to stay there. Do we pull out now? No, we don't. But at least I do know that President Ramaphosa has begun this talks to try and foster peace amongst themselves. We have offered training militarily when they have made peace. We know that if they are allowed to have that peace, if they come together, the DRC will be one of the biggest economies in this continent. But until they do so, this conflict affects all of us.
You have such an interesting career in that you've served in cabinet, but you've also been a leader of the legislative arm of government as well. What were some of what was the biggest challenge in leading Parliament and being Speaker of the National Assembly?
Well, I didn't have much of a challenge really, because the most important thing when you are leading any house, and I had good practice because in 2004 I was the Northwest Provincial Speaker, the legislature.
Right.
It is that the Speaker needs to understand that once they sit on that chair, they are everybody's Speaker. Your rulings have no eyes. When you preside, you need to know the rules you are applying. But you also really need to be objective. You must also expect that you will be challenged. And so if you are going to take shortcuts, you don't know the rules, you get emotional, you are going to get into trouble. All parties must be able to have the confidence of the Speaker. And sometimes I had issues with my own party.
Really?
And I would say, no, I'm not taking that route because this is what the rule says, and I'm sticking to it. So if you are going to be swayed from there by especially members who have not read through the rules, you get into trouble. I must say I wasn't too keen to go into the executive.
Really?
No, I wasn't.
Why is that?
Precisely because, remember, I started off as a member of the Joint Standing Committee and Defence Committees of Parliament. I knew the problems in defence. throughout the years, I knew. So you were becoming a member of the executive in a badly budgeted for department. Morale is low because you have not been looking well after your soldiers. You have wars coming in. Now, it is a tough one, but of course I love defense.
Absolutely.
And I will always be rooting out for the soldier. But until we sort out the financing of that department, no minister will really get it to turn around the corner. You've got good soldiers the world throughout. You've got good policies there. You are trendsetters when it comes to dealing with issues in the world militarily. But you are not resourcing these people who are your face, who are fighting all over the world, representing you all over the world. So I'm hoping that they will be well looked after.
And I wonder how life has been for you now, not being on the executive. How are you finding life? You've been in so many different positions. You're still in the ANC NEC, so you are clearly someone who loves hard work and important positions. But at the same time, I'm sure this has been something of a change for you not being in the executive. How's that been?
It's the first few weeks were funny. Was used 5 o'clock I would be up. My bedside table would always have something that I must read through. Sometimes you slept at midnight. Wow. I can tell you. So the first few weeks were kind of funny because I would still wake up at 5 o'clock and that's it. Close your eyes, sleep. But I don't want to lie. For the first time since I came out of jail, I've had a number of months for myself.
Wow.
I have rested. I'm reading all the books I had bought that I never had time to read. I'm writing what I want to write.
Lovely.
I have a chance to see my grandkids. I can tell you, I know exactly where the cracks are in my house's wall. It is the time that I am appreciating. I have given my best. Where I didn't meet the standards, it wasn't because I didn't want to. Given my best to what South Africa must get. I wish I had done more. But for now, I enjoy the little piece that I have. I don't know if there is anything around the corner. If it is, I will, of course, serve.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But for now, as I say, I'm resting as much as I can. And I am enjoying it.
Even watching some YouTube videos from time to time.
Yes.
YouTube interviews.
I've even learned to watch movies. Netflix girl.
Lovely, lovely. You, of course, have served in democracy, but I mean, many people know your contributions in Mkondo Esizwe, but maybe don't know as much about your early life, certainly people from my generation. What was it that led you to take that momentous decision to join Mkondo Esizwe? And what is it that led you to be an activist long before you were a minister or a public representative?
Maybe the family. I grew up with my parents having divorced when I was a toddler at 18 months. Didn't understand. These people could talk but were not in the same house. And that was because my father was an activist who, when he got frustrated, brought the violence in the house and that killed the marriage. But I grew up in that small township, Huhudi. When I grew up, there was only one entrance from the side of town.
Wow.
And there would be times when somebody would scream at the beginning of the township and that scream would be carried on. And that would be warning for our fathers to run away because the Kwela-Kwelas are coming into that small location and they would pick up these men who couldn't find jobs anywhere. I grew up actually accusing my dad that we were being just humiliated and they had done nothing because I didn't know the history. So when 76 came, I was ready for anything. When the children were shot at here in Soweto, remember now, my township was not even allowed to have a high school. So after Standard 6, you had to go to another town to be able to do your secondary and high school. So I was in Mafikeng for my matric. Soweto kids were in Mafikeng, their brothers and sisters were being killed here. So as a student leader, we had meetings. And I think deep down, the way we joined in from the rural townships, it was because for a longest of times, the way our fathers and our mothers were treated in the small dorpies was actually more terrible than the cities. The fact that you had to jump off the pavement because a white person is coming had led me to beat up a white boy in one of the parks in Freiburg. And almost got arrested. I think I was in Standard 6 or something. So that anger, when the school kids were killed, when we started a meeting up, when we marched in Mafikeng and the answer was shoot at us, was just enough. It was just enough to listen to the stories of our Bomme Ruth, to listen to the stories of those who had left, and to decide, no, we're going to fight. And I've never regretted that decision. I think when the time comes for anybody to take a stand and they morally believe it, they have no option, then they must. I will never regret that. And I think that I look at our children who should not have gone through. And that moment came back to us, Nosis Baleka, when I was in the NCOP and she was Speaker of the National Assembly.
Right.
The fears must fall.
Of course. Yes.
And when the kids came in, broke windows and whatever in Parliament demanding, we said to the police, you're not going to arrest these kids. Because some of us marched.
Wow, you actually said
no,
that
we
to
didn't.
the police?
Parliament, we refused to have the kids prosecuted. The ones who, we said, you're not going to do it to our children.
Wow.
In fact, we took it upon ourselves to speak on behalf of these kids to make sure that government does have the funds to begin to push our kids. Of course, it was a decision that was taken in a rush, not well prepared for. And sometimes my heart just breaks when I hear the stories about NSFAS because this is supposed to help our children to get where their grandparents did not get, to really begin to put issues of color and ethnic politics aside to create a nation that we need to build. So without education, what are we going to do? We're not going to really begin to get a South African nation. We're still in groups. Hey, I come from the Northwest, you come from the Eastern Cape. When do we see each other as just South Africans who can move across these regions and provinces, who will be at home without remembering the mother tongue? We should find ways of going back to building the South African nation. We're only a nation when we go to rugby. And drinking beer, I think. We need to do more.
Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel. So why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it. What did you make of former President Zuma's decision to break from the ANC and actually use the name of MK as well, having been in Mkhonto weSizwe yourself?
I don't support that. The ANC is not infallible. The NEC members are just people. We make mistakes. Sometimes we are right, sometimes we don't. We're not right. But I vowed to be a member of the ANC who is disciplined. I vowed that whatever it is, and I still do, whatever it is that makes me unhappy, I have a platform. If they don't give it to me, I will find a way of putting my issues on the table. I also think that perhaps over the years we have been too nice in not dealing with issues of discipline within the ANC. And those are the issues which have made us get to 40% in this last elections. I have known former President Zuma since I was a teenager. In fact, when I was infiltrating into the country, he's the guy who was driving me in.
Wow.
I've always called him Ubaba. I will continue to call him Ubaba, but I don't agree with him on this one. I think when we have issues in the ANC, we must fight those issues and get them resolved within the ANC. To divide us up into MK this and that, that will not help. That will not help the agenda that the ANC still has to navigate and actually produce, because we have not even started scratching the surface of making South Africans equal. We worry about that, and so the divisions amongst ourselves are not helpful. I do accept that he's older than me. I still call him Ubaba. He's older than me. He's probably wiser than me, but on this one we differ. I think we must solve the ANC problems and continue to understand that for as long as we are people, we will agree today and differ tomorrow. Singapheli inhliziyo. Resolve issues.
Well, Thandi Modise, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor. We thank you for the sacrifices and contributions you've made for our country, and also the dedication you've shown in various parts of our government. And I, for one, suspect that there will be more contributions to come. But we're just so happy to have you on this show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. Like, share, comment down below. And don't forget to help us get to 200,000 subscribers as our next milestone. Aye.
Aye.